I sat behind a pillar at my sister's wedding. Everyone acted like I wasn't family. Then a stranger sat next to me and whispered, "Just follow my lead and pretend you're my date." When he stood to speak, every head turned. My sister stopped smiling. Full story. Have you ever been made to feel so utterly insignificant by your own family that you questioned if you even existed? Well, at my sister's perfectly orchestrated wedding, I finally reached my breaking point. But what happened next? Oh, trust me, you won't believe it. Let me take you back a few months before that fateful day. I was living in Denver, happily elbow-deep in flour and sugar as a pastry chef at this amazing boutique bakery downtown. My apartment was small, cozy, and always smelled like vanilla and cinnamon from my late-night baking experiments. One Tuesday morning, after pulling an all-nighter perfecting honey lavender croissants, I stumbled home around 2 p.m. and almost missed it, an elegant, cream-colored invitation wedged between bills. It was from Victoria, my older sister, the golden child, the daughter who, in our mother's eyes, could do no wrong. The invitation was exactly what you'd expect, formal, traditional, announcing her union to someone named Gregory. A name I'd never heard her utter. You'd think I'd be happy, right? Sisters are supposed to celebrate these milestones. But as I held that heavy card, my mind replayed our last family dinner, Thanksgiving, 6 months earlier. I had spent 2 days crafting a pumpkin cheesecake, layered with spice cream cheese and a ginger snap crust. It was a masterpiece. Victoria, she brought a store-bought pie. "Elizabeth, you really shouldn't have gone to so much trouble," my mother had said, barely glancing at my dessert before banishing it to the far corner of the buffet. "Victoria's pie looks lovely, so classic and traditional." That was our dynamic in a nutshell. Victoria could show up empty-handed and be lauded just for existing. I could present the moon on a silver platter, and it would somehow be too much, too showy, trying too hard. Tucked inside the wedding invitation was a small note, handwritten in Victoria's perfect cursive. "Elizabeth, I know we haven't been as close lately, but it would mean everything to have you there. You're my only sister." That evening I called her. She answered on the 4th ring, sounding distant. "Victoria, I got your invitation. Congratulations." I chirped, trying to sound genuinely thrilled. "Oh, good. I was worried it might get lost." "Can you make it?" she asked. "Of course, I wouldn't miss it. Tell me about Gregory. How did you two meet?" There was a pause, just long enough to make me wonder. "At a pharmaceutical conference. He's a regional director at Bennett Health Solutions. Very successful, very established. Mother absolutely adores him." Of course she did. I wondered if Victoria loved him, or just loved how he looked on paper. "I'm really happy for you," I said, trying to infuse it with sincerity. "Thank you. Listen, I have to run. We're meeting with the wedding planner in 20 minutes. I'll send you more details later." She hung up before I could even say goodbye. I stared at my phone, the abruptness stinging. Something familiar settled in my chest. It wasn't quite sadness, not quite anger. It was that dull, persistent ache of being perpetually secondary. The weeks leading up to the wedding flew by. I bought a new dress, a soft blue that complemented my complexion without being attention-grabbing. I arranged time off, much to my boss's dismay, as June is our busiest season. I probably should have seen the writing on the wall when Victoria didn't ask me to be a bridesmaid. 5 bridesmaids I saw on her social media, college friends, work friends, even our cousin Jessica, whom she'd barely spoken to in years. But not me. "The wedding party is already set," she'd explained. I understood then that I'd never truly be part of her inner circle. Our shared childhood meant nothing compared to her current social standing. The wedding was set for a Saturday in late June, at an upscale resort just outside Denver. I drove there alone, my new dress carefully hanging in the back seat, a small gift wrapped in silver on the passenger seat. I'd spent weeks agonizing over the gift, finally settling on handcrafted ceramic bowls from a local artist. Something thoughtful, something that showed I cared. The resort was breathtaking. Manicured lawns, mountain views, a ceremony site overlooking a pristine lake. White chairs arranged in perfect rows, flowers everywhere. Victoria had spared no expense, which, let's be real, meant our mother had spared no expense. This was the wedding she'd always dreamed of, the perfect culmination of her perfect daughter's perfect life. I arrived 2 hours early, hoping to find Victoria, offer help, or just support. Instead, I found chaos. The bridal suite buzzed with laughing women in matching robes, champagne glasses clinking, a photographer snapping every moment. I knocked softly. Victoria glanced up from her makeup chair, her eyes meeting mine for just a second before sliding away. "Elizabeth, you're here early. I thought maybe I could help with something." I offered. "Everything's under control. The wedding planner has it all handled. Why don't you go find your seat? The ceremony starts soon." One of the bridesmaids, a blonde I didn't recognize, giggled and whispered something. They both looked at me and smiled, that polite but please leave kind of smile. I backed out, my face burning. I shouldn't have come early. I shouldn't have assumed I'd be welcome in that inner sanctum. Outside, the ceremony site was still being prepped. I wandered to the guest seating area, looking for my name card. Row after row of chairs stretched before me. The front rows were clearly for immediate family VIPs. I expected to find my name in the second or third row, close enough to show I mattered, far enough to acknowledge I wasn't part of Victoria's daily life. I found my name card in the very last row, partially hidden behind a decorative pillar supporting the ceremony arbor. From that seat, I'd have a block. Ked view of the ceremony, unable to see my sister's face as she said her vows. I stood there, holding that little card with my name printed in elegant script, and something inside me cracked. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. This was Victoria's way of putting me exactly where she thought I belonged. Out of sight, out of mind, barely acknowledged. I could have left, driven back to Denver, called in sick, and nursed my wounded pride with ice cream and bad TV. But stubbornness kept my feet rooted. I was her sister. I'd been invited, and I'd be damned if I'd give her the satisfaction of my absence. Guests started arriving around 4. I watched from my corner behind the pillar. Family members I hadn't seen in years, aunts, uncles, cousins. None of them noticed me. My mother arrived 20 minutes before the ceremony, resplendent in a champagne-colored gown that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She beamed, accepting congratulations, escorted to the front row. She didn't look back, didn't scan the crowd for her younger daughter. Why would she? I was exactly where I was supposed to be, invisible. The ceremony began at 5 precisely. Music swelled. The wedding party processed down the aisle, bridesmaids in sage green, groomsmen in sharp navy. Then Victoria appeared on our father's arm. Even from my obstructed view, I could tell she was stunning. Her dress, a masterpiece of lace and silk. Our father, who I'd barely spoken to since the divorce 5 years ago, looked so proud. I craned my neck around the pillar, trying for a better view. The angle was terrible. I saw maybe 40% of the actual ceremony, mostly the backs of heads. That's when I noticed I wasn't alone. 2 chairs away, also partially hidden by the pillar, sat a man. Younger than most guests, maybe early 30s. Perfectly tailored charcoal suit. Dark hair. Sharp features. But what struck me was his expression. He looked as out of place and uncomfortable as I felt. He caught me looking and offered a small, sympathetic smile. I smiled back weakly, turning my attention to the ceremony, or what little I could see of it. The officiant spoke about love. Victoria and Gregory exchanged vows, too quiet to hear from my perch. Rings. A kiss. Enthusiastic applause. Just like that, my sister was married. The ceremony lasted maybe 25 minutes, though it felt both longer and shorter. As guests began to move towards the cocktail hour, the stranger from my row approached. Up close, he was even more striking with intelligent gray eyes. That was quite a view, wasn't it? His voice carried a hint of amusement. Spectacular, I replied dryly. I especially enjoyed the back of that gentleman's head in row 8. Very photogenic. He laughed, a genuine sound that loosened something in my chest. I'm Julian, and I'm guessing from your prime seating assignment that you're either someone's least favorite relative or you insulted the wedding planner. Elizabeth, and I'm the bride's sister, actually. His eyebrows shot up. Her sister? And they put you back here. Apparently, I'm not part of the wedding aesthetic. Julian studied me for a moment, and I had the distinct impression he saw far more than my bitter humor. Well, that's their loss. The cocktail hour is about to start, and I have a feeling it's going to be just as awkward as the ceremony. What do you say we face it together? You don't have to pity me. I'm fine. It's not pity. It's strategic alliance. I'm here as a +1 for a business associate who couldn't make it, which means I know exactly 3 people at this wedding. And 2 of them are the couple who just got married and won't remember I exist. So really, you'd be doing me a favor. There was something so genuine in his offer, something that made me want to say yes despite my wounded pride. Before I could respond, he extended his arm. Shall we? I hesitated only a moment before linking my arm through his. Together, we walked toward the cocktail hour, and for the first time since arriving, I didn't feel completely alone. The cocktail hour was in a spacious pavilion overlooking the lake. Julian stayed close as we navigated the crowd. People clustered, conversations buzzing with the pleasant energy of free-flowing champagne. Several guests glanced our way, wondering who he was and why he'd attached himself to the bride's invisible sister. We found a quiet table. Julian returned from the bar with 2 glasses of wine and a plate of appetizers he'd somehow convinced a server to compile for us. So, he said, settling into the chair, tell me about your sister. What's she like when she's not starring in the wedding of the century? I took a sip of wine, considering my answer. The truth felt raw, too revealing. But something about Julian's steady gaze made me want to be honest. Victoria is perfect. Or at least, she's always worked very hard to appear perfect. Good grades, good career, good relationships. She's the daughter every parent dreams of having. And you're not, he asked gently. I'm the daughter who became a pastry chef instead of a doctor or lawyer, who lives in a small apartment instead of a house with a mortgage, who dates occasionally instead of landing a pharmaceutical director with excellent prospects. I'm the disappointment, the one who didn't follow the script. Julian selected a crab cake, a pastry chef. That's an art form, Elizabeth. Not everyone can master that craft. Try telling my mother that. She still introduces me as Elizabeth who works with food, like I'm flipping burgers at a fast food chain. Family dynamics can be complicated. That's a diplomatic way of saying my family is dysfunctional. I grabbed a stuffed mushroom, suddenly ravenous. I'd been too nervous to eat earlier. What about you? What do you do that landed you an invitation to this event? I work in renewable energy consulting. My company helps businesses transition to sustainable practices. Boring, technical stuff that makes people's eyes glaze over at parties. That doesn't sound boring at all. It sounds important. Thanks. Most people just want to know if I can get them a deal on solar panels. He smiled, but there was something guarded in his expression. I was supposed to be here with my colleague Dominic. He's the one who actually knows the groom, but he came down with pneumonia last week. I got volunteered to represent our company. So, we're both wedding crashers in our own way. Survivors of inadequate seating arrangements, at least. We talked through the cocktail hour, and I found myself relaxing despite everything. Julian was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed genuine interest, not just polite small talk. He wanted to know about my favorite desserts, the challenges of a professional kitchen, why I chose pastry. I asked him about his work, the satisfaction of helping companies, the frustrations of clients who wanted change but weren't willing to do the hard work. He spoke passionately about renewable energy, about creating systems for future generations, and I found myself captivated by his enthusiasm. "You really believe in what you do," I observed. "Is that so surprising? Most people at my sister's wedding seem more interested in appearing successful than actually being passionate about anything." Julian's expression shifted, something calculating entering his eyes. "You notice a lot for someone who is sitting behind a pillar. When you're invisible, you learn to watch people. It's amazing what you see when no one knows you're looking." A server announced dinner was being served. Guests began flowing toward the ballroom. Julian stood offering his hand, ready to see if your seating assignment for dinner is any better. It wasn't. The reception hall was gorgeous, thousands of dollars worth of flowers and lighting. Long tables arranged in a U shape, the head table elevated. I found my name at a table in the far corner, positioned so I'd have to crane my neck awkwardly to see the head table. The chairs around me were empty, suggesting I'd been placed with the overflow guests, the ones who had to be invited but didn't quite fit anywhere else. Julian appeared at my elbow, his own place card in hand. Interesting. I'm at the opposite end of the room. Almost like someone wanted to make sure the unimportant guests were spread out so we wouldn't cluster and make the seating chart look unbalanced. "This is ridiculous." The words came out sharper than I intended, frustration finally breaking through my careful composure. "I'm her sister, her only sibling, and she's treating me like some distant acquaintance she felt obligated to invite. You know what? Screw the seating chart." Julian plucked my place card from the table and pocketed it along with his own. "Come on, what are you doing?" "Improvising. Just follow my lead and pretend you're my date." Before I could protest, he guided me toward a table much closer to the head table, one clearly designated for important guests. He pulled out a chair for me, his hand warm on my back as I sat, then settled into the seat beside me with the confidence of someone who belonged exactly where he was. "Julian, we can and we did. If anyone asks, there was a mix-up with the seating assignments, and we're fixing it ourselves. Trust me." The table quickly filled with Gregory's business associates, people from the pharmaceutical industry who spoke in acronyms and trade, terms I didn't understand. They greeted Julian with familiarity, and he responded with easy confidence. A woman named Patricia, introduced as VP of Operations at Bennett Health Solutions, smiled warmly at me. "And you must be Julian's girlfriend. He's been keeping you a secret." I opened my mouth to correct her, but Julian smoothly interjected. "Elizabeth prefers to stay out of the spotlight. She's not one for corporate events usually, but she made an exception for this wedding." "How sweet. And how do you know the bride and groom?" Patricia asked. "Elizabeth is Victoria's sister, actually." Patricia's eyebrows lifted. "Oh, I had no idea Victoria had a sister. She never mentioned it during any of our meetings about the wedding arrangements." Her smile faltered slightly, as if realizing how that sounded. I'm sure it just never came up in conversation." "I'm sure," I replied, keeping my voice neutral, even as the comment stung. My sister had worked closely enough with Gregory's colleagues to plan aspects of this wedding, and she'd never once mentioned having a sister. Dinner was served in courses, each more elaborate than the last. Seared scallops, fresh salad, choice of beef tenderloin or salmon. The food was exceptional, but I barely tasted it. I was too aware of Julian beside me, of the way he played his role as my date with convincing ease. His hand occasionally touched my shoulder or back. Small gestures that looked casual but felt intentional. He included me in conversations, deferred to my opinions, made me feel visible in a way I hadn't felt since arriving. Between courses, Gregory's father gave a speech, praising his son, welcoming Victoria, speaking of their bright future. Then my mother stood. Her speech was shorter, but no less effusive. She spoke of Victoria's childhood, her determination, her grace, how she'd always known Victoria would achieve great things. She recounted mother-daughter shopping trips, cake tastings, all the precious moments. She didn't mention me. It was as if I'd been edited out of the family history entirely. I felt Julian's hand find mine under the table, his fingers intertwining with mine. I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. Then came the best man's speech, the maid of honors. I waited for someone to mention me, to acknowledge my existence in even the most minimal way. But speech after speech passed, and my name never came up. I was the ghost at the feast, present but unseen. Dessert arrived, an elaborate, tiered creation of chocolate and raspberry. It looked impressive, but lacked the depth of flavor it should have had. The ganache was too sweet, the cake layers too dry. As a professional, I couldn't help but critique it. Julian noticed my expression. Not up to your standards. It's beautiful, but beauty isn't everything. The execution is off. The chocolate is masking the raspberry instead of complementing it, and the texture is too dense. Could you do better? In my sleep, the words came out more confident than I felt, but they were true. I might be the family disappointment in every other area, but in the kitchen I knew my worth. I believe you, Julian said simply. After dessert, the reception transitioned into dancing. Victoria and Gregory took the floor for their first dance, swirling under perfect lighting. My father cut in for the father-daughter dance, and I watched them, remembering the times he'd spun me around our living room when I was small, before the divorce, before everything fell apart. Did Victoria remember those times? Did she ever think about the family we used to be? Julian stood and offered his hand. Dance with me. You don't have to keep playing the attentive date. I'm fine. I know I don't have to. I want to. Besides, I'm a terrible dancer, and I need someone to step on who won't sue me. I let him lead me onto the dance floor. He wasn't terrible at all. He was quite good, actually leading with confidence while keeping a respectful distance. We swayed to the music, and I found myself relaxing into the rhythm, into the moment. Thank you, I said quietly, for tonight, for sitting with me, for the whole fake date thing. You didn't have to do any of this. Maybe I wanted to. You're interesting, Elizabeth. More interesting than anyone else at this wedding. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're talented and underappreciated. I know you see through the superficial nonsense that most people accept without question. I know you're hurt, but you're trying not to show it, and that takes strength. His words hit something deep inside me, a place I'd been protecting all evening. My eyes burned with unshed tears, and I blinked rapidly, refusing to cry at my sister's wedding. The song ended. Julian guided us to the edge of the dance floor. I need some air, I admitted. Let's go outside. We slipped out onto a terrace overlooking the gardens. The evening air was cool and welcome. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees, creating a magical atmosphere that felt at odds with the turmoil inside me. I shouldn't have come, I said, leaning against the railing. I knew it would be like this, but some part of me hoped it would be different. That maybe Victoria would remember we're sisters. That maybe she'd want me here for real, not just to check a box on her obligation list. Julian stood beside me, his shoulder touching mine. Family can be the most complicated relationship we have. We're bound to them by blood, but that doesn't guarantee love or respect, or even basic consideration. You sound like you're speaking from experience. My father and I haven't spoken in 3 years. He had very specific plans for my life. When I chose a different path, he made it clear I was no longer the son he wanted. So yes, I understand what it feels like to be the disappointment. I turned to look at him, seeing new layers in his expression. I'm sorry. That must have been painful. It is. But I learned something important from it. The people who are supposed to love us unconditionally are still people with their own limitations, prejudices, and failures. Sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we're born into. Is that what tonight is? You choosing to be kind to a stranger? Maybe it started that way, but you're not a stranger anymore, Elizabeth. And this isn't just kindness. There was something in his voice that made my heart beat faster. Before I could respond, the terrace doors opened, and a group of guests spilled out, laughing. The moment broke, and Julian stepped back slightly. We should probably go back inside. I think they're about to cut the cake. The cake-cutting ceremony was everything I expected. More photos, more speeches, more perfect moments. Victoria fed Gregory a small bite with delicate precision. He returned the gesture. No smashed cake and faces. Nothing undignified. Perfect control as always. As servers distributed slices, I noticed my mother making her way through the crowd. She was in her element, basking in the reflected glory of her daughter's successful wedding. When her gaze finally landed on me, surprise flickered, followed quickly by disapproval. She approached our table, her smile tightening. Elizabeth, I didn't expect to see you sitting here. This table was reserved for Gregory's business associates. There was a seating mix-up, Julian said smoothly, before I could respond. I'm Julian, one of Gregory's renewable energy consultants. Elizabeth and I are here together. My mother's gaze swept over Julian, taking in his expensive suit and confident demeanor. I could see her recalculating, reassessing my presence based on the caliber of my companion. I see. Well, it's lovely to meet you, Julian. I'm Eleanor, Victoria's mother. She emphasized the words, as if to remind me of my place in the hierarchy. I wasn't aware Elizabeth was seeing anyone. We've been keeping things quiet, Julian replied, his hand finding mine on the table. Elizabeth is quite private about her personal life. Yes, she is. Eleanor's smile didn't reach her eyes. Elizabeth, dear, I hope you're enjoying the wedding. Victoria worked so hard to make everything perfect. It's beautiful, I said, forcing the words out. She must be very happy. She is. Gregory is exactly the kind of man I always hoped she'd marry. Successful, established from a good family. It's everything a mother could want for her daughter. The unspoken comparison hung in the air. Unlike you, who works in a bakery and lives alone and has nothing to show for your life. Julian's grip on my hand tightened slightly, a silent show of support. Elizabeth was just telling me about her work as a pastry chef, he cut in smoothly. It sounds incredibly demanding. Not everyone has the talent or discipline to succeed in that field. Eleanor's expression flickered with annoyance at having her implied criticism deflected. Yes, well, we all have our different paths. I should get back to the other guests. Do try to enjoy yourself, Elizabeth. She swept away, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and maternal disappointment in her wake. That was unpleasant, Julian observed when she was out of earshot. That was my mother on a good day. You should see her when she's really trying to make a point. I'm starting to understand why you were sitting behind that pillar. The evening wore on. Victoria and Gregory made their rounds. They reached our table eventually, Gregory leading with a politician's smile. Up close, I could see he was handsome in a conventional way, but lacked character. His handshake was firm, but perfunctory when Julian introduced himself. Then Victoria's eyes landed on me, and something complex passed across her face. Surprise, definitely discomfort perhaps. She'd probably forgotten I was even here, tucked away in my assigned corner. Elizabeth, you look lovely, she said, her voice carrying that careful politeness people use with acquaintances they don't quite remember. Thank you. The wedding is beautiful, Victoria. Congratulations. I'm so glad you could make it. And I see you've met some of Gregory's colleagues. Her gaze slid to Julian with curiosity. I don't believe we've been introduced. Julian, I work with Gregory on sustainability initiatives for Bennett Health Solutions, and I have the pleasure of being Elizabeth's date this evening. Victoria's eyes widened slightly. This was clearly news to her. "Oh, I didn't realize you were seeing anyone, Elizabeth." How wonderful. The way she said it, with that slight emphasis on wonderful, suggested she found it more surprising than wonderful, as if she couldn't quite believe someone like Julian would be interested in someone like me. "We've been dating for a few months," Julian continued, his arm sliding around my waist in a gesture that looked natural and possessive. "Elizabeth is remarkable. I count myself lucky she tolerates my workaholic tendencies." "How nice," Victoria said, though her smile had frozen. "Well, we should continue making our rounds. So many people to thank. But let's catch up properly soon, Elizabeth. I feel like we haven't really talked in ages." They moved on, and I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "That was surreal," I murmured. "She seemed surprised to see you looking happy." Victoria isn't used to me having anything she might consider valuable, including a handsome date who impresses her new in-laws. "So you think I'm handsome?" Julian's eyes danced with amusement. "Don't let it go to your head. You're objectively attractive. It's not a personal observation." "Of course not. Purely objective." Around 10, the wedding coordinator announced the bride and groom would be leaving shortly. Guests were invited to line up outside with sparklers for the send-off. I debated skipping this part, but Julian convinced me. "You came this far? Might as well see it through to the end." We stood in line, sparklers in hand. Victoria and Gregory emerged, running through the corridor of light, laughing, waving, before climbing into a luxury car. As it pulled away, tail lights disappearing into the night, I felt a strange sense of finality. The wedding was over. Victoria had gotten her perfect day, her perfect marriage, her perfect life. And I had stood witness to it all, from my position on the margins, exactly where she wanted me. Guests began dispersing. Julian and I lingered. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked. "I'm actually staying at the resort tonight, room 314, I said a little hesitantly. "What about you?" "Same. Room 209. My colleague had already booked it." We walked slowly through the gardens. The night air had cooled, and I shivered slightly in my thin dress. Julian immediately shrugged out of his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. A gesture so classic, so unexpected. "You don't have to do that. I'm fine." Humor me. I was raised with old-fashioned manners, and my mother would haunt me if I let you freeze. His jacket was warm and smelled like expensive cologne mixed with something uniquely him. I pulled it closer, grateful for both the warmth and the excuse to keep something of his with me a little longer. "Thank you," I said, "for everything tonight. You turned what could have been a miserable evening into something almost bearable." "Just bearable? I'll have to work on my fake dating skills." "Okay, better than bearable. Surprisingly pleasant in parts." "That's more like it." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "Elizabeth, I know tonight started as a strategic alliance between two wedding outcasts, but I want you to know it became more than that for me. You're genuinely interesting, funny, talented, and far too good for people who can't see your worth." His words wrapped around something fragile inside me, something I'd been protecting for too long. "Julian, I know we just met. What about seeing each other again after tonight, after this wedding, in the real world, where we're just two people without assigned seating charts and family drama?" I wanted to say yes immediately. Every instinct told me this man was different. This connection felt real, despite the unusual circumstances. But doubt crept in, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother, reminding me that men like Julian didn't date women like me, that this was probably just kindness, nothing more. "You don't have to say that just because you felt sorry for me tonight. I'm not. I'm saying it because I spent the evening with someone I genuinely enjoyed, and I want more evenings like that, because you make me laugh and think and feel less alone in crowded rooms, because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing better." He paused, vulnerability crossing his features. But if you're not interested, I understand. I don't want to push. I am interested, I admitted, the words rushing out before I could second-guess them. I just don't want to get my hopes up about something that might disappear in the morning light. Then let's make sure it doesn't disappear. Have breakfast with me tomorrow. The resort has a decent restaurant, and we can talk without tuxedos and wedding stress. What do you say? Breakfast sounds good. His smile was genuine and relieved. 9 o'clock. I'll meet you in the lobby. We'd reached the entrance to the resort. This was the moment the evening would officially end. Julian seemed reluctant to leave, too. He stood close, his hand still holding mine, his eyes searching my face. Good night, Elizabeth. I'm glad I crashed your sister's wedding. I'm glad you did, too. Good night, Julian. He leaned in slowly, giving me time to pull away. I didn't want to. His lips met mine in a kiss that was gentle and questioning, and somehow exactly right. It lasted only a moment before he pulled back, his thumb brushing my cheek. Then he was walking away toward the elevators, and I was standing alone in the lobby, wearing his jacket and touching my lips, wondering what exactly had just happened. I made my way to my room in a daze. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Thanks for coming tonight. It meant a lot to have you there. I stared at the message for a long moment. It meant a lot. Really? Was that why she'd relegated me to the worst seat? Why she'd never mentioned having a sister? Why she'd looked surprised to find me at a decent table? I typed and deleted several responses before settling on something non-committal. Congratulations again. The wedding was beautiful. She responded immediately. We should definitely get together when I'm back from the honeymoon. I want to hear all about your new boyfriend. He seems very successful. Of course. That's what she'd taken away. Not that I'd been there supporting her, but that I'd shown up with an impressive date. That was the only thing that made me visible to her. I didn't respond. Instead, I set my phone aside, processing the emotional whiplash of the day. I'd come to this wedding expecting to feel like an outsider, and I'd been proven right in the worst ways. But I'd also met Julian, had those hours of feeling seen and valued. And now I had breakfast to look forward to. Sleep came slowly. Tomorrow I'd go home to Denver, back to my life. But something had shifted tonight, some fundamental understanding about my place in my family and my own worth. I woke around 8 the next morning. Julian was waiting in the lobby at 9, looking refreshed in jeans and a navy sweater that made his gray eyes even more striking. He smiled when he saw me. Good morning. You look beautiful. You look pretty good yourself. Is that my line, though? Aren't men supposed to be the ones getting compliments? I believe in equal opportunity compliments. Come on, I heard they make excellent waffles here. Over breakfast, we talked more freely. Julian told me about his work. I told him about the bakery, my boss, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful and delicious. You light up when you talk about baking, Julian observed. It's obvious you love what you do. I do. It's the one area of my life where I feel completely confident. No second-guessing, no wondering if I'm good enough. I know I'm good at what I do. Then why do you let your family make you feel otherwise? The question was direct, almost confrontational, but his tone remained gentle. I set down my fork, because they're my family, because some part of me still wants their approval, even though I know I'll never get it. Not the way Victoria gets it, anyway. What if you stopped wanting their approval? What if you decided your opinion of yourself mattered more than theirs? Easier said than done when you've spent your whole life being compared to someone and coming up short. Julian reached across the table, his hand covering mine. For what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary, and I don't say that lightly. We finished breakfast and walked outside. I should probably get on the road soon, I said reluctantly. I have work tomorrow. Before you go, can I ask you something? Julian's expression turned serious. Last night, watching how your family treated you, seeing how they've made you feel small and unimportant, it made me angry. Not just sympathetic. but genuinely angry on your behalf. That's kind of you, but I'm not finished. What if there was a way to change the narrative, to make them see you differently, to give you back some of the power they've been taking from you all these years? I studied his face, trying to understand where this was going. What do you mean? I mean, what if we continued this? Not fake dating, but real dating. What if we spent time together, built something genuine, and along the way showed your family that you're not the disappointment they've painted you as? Julian, I'm not going to use you to make my family jealous. That's not fair to you. You wouldn't be using me. I'm offering because I want to see you again regardless. But I also want to help you if I can. Think about it. Your sister just married a pharmaceutical executive, right? Well, I happen to be someone her new husband's company needs. Someone who could make things very interesting for them. A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the morning air. What are you saying exactly? Julian's expression shifted, becoming more calculating than I had seen before. I'm saying that Gregory's company, Bennett Health Solutions, has been in talks with my firm about a major sustainability overhaul. It's a multi-million-dollar project that would significantly improve their environmental impact and their public image. I'm one of the lead consultants on the proposal, and you'd use that as leverage somehow. Not leverage exactly, just an opportunity to remind them that people they overlook might be more important than they realize. Your family, especially Victoria, seems very invested in status and success. What if you suddenly had access to that world through me? What if they had to see you differently? I should have said no. I should have thanked him, explained that revenge wasn't my style, that I was above such pettiness. But standing there in the morning light, remembering every slight and dismissal from the night before, something darker whispered that maybe I deserved a little vindication. This feels manipulative, I said slowly. Is it more manipulative than seating you behind a pillar at your own sister's wedding? Than never mentioning you have a sister too? Colleagues she worked with on planning? Than your mother pretending you don't exist in her speeches? Julian's voice was passionate. Sometimes the people who hurt us need to be shown consequences. Not cruelty, just consequences. What would this actually look like? I'm not going to sabotage anyone's business or career. I'm not that person. Nothing like that. I'm talking about visibility, about making sure you're present and acknowledged at future family events, about your sister and mother realizing that dismissing you means potentially damaging relationships that matter to Gregory's career, about you finally getting the respect you deserve, even if it starts from a place of obligation rather than genuine affection. It was twisted logic, and I knew it, but it was also seductive. How many years had I spent being invisible? How many family gatherings had I endured being treated as lesser? The thought of Victoria being forced to acknowledge me, to include me, to treat me like I mattered, it was intoxicating. I need to think about this, I said finally. Of course, take all the time you need. But Elizabeth, whether you agree to any of this or not, I meant what I said about wanting to see you again. That part is real. No manipulation involved. We exchanged numbers. Julian kissed me goodbye, another gentle kiss that made my heart race. And then I was driving back to Denver, my thoughts in a whirlwind. The next week was a blur of work and confusion. Julian texted me daily, casual messages that gradually built into longer conversations. We talked about everything and nothing. Books, travel, childhood memories. He never pushed about his proposition, never brought up Victoria or revenge. He just talked to me like I was someone worth knowing. On Friday, he called. I have a business dinner next Thursday in Denver. A potential client I'm trying to woo. Would you want to join me? Fair warning, it might be boring corporate talk, but I'd love your company. Are you sure? I don't know anything about renewable energy consulting. That's exactly why I want you there. You'll keep me honest, keep the conversation from disappearing into jargon. Plus, the restaurant is supposed to have an incredible pastry chef. I thought you might enjoy critiquing their desserts. I laughed despite myself. You're bribing me with professional reconnaissance. Is it working? Yes. What's the dress code? Thursday arrived. Julian picked me up at 7, devastatingly handsome in a dark suit. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices. Julian's client was already there. Patricia, the woman I recognized from Victoria's wedding, one of Gregory's colleagues. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Elizabeth, what a lovely surprise. I didn't realize you and Julian were still together. Still together and going strong, Julian said smoothly, his hand warm on my back. Elizabeth has been patient with my crazy work schedule. We sat, and I tried to fade into the background as Julian and Patricia discussed the sustainability project. But Patricia kept pulling me into the conversation, asking about my work, expressing genuine interest in the bakery. That sounds fascinating. I have such respect for people who work with their hands, who create tangible things. My job is all spreadsheets and conference calls. Sometimes I miss making something real. The dinner progressed pleasantly. When dessert arrived, a deconstructed lemon tart with lavender cream, I couldn't help but offer my professional opinion. The components are technically excellent, but they're fighting each other rather than creating harmony. The lavender is too strong, overwhelming the lemon instead of complementing it. Patricia leaned forward with interest. Could you fix it? If you were making this, what would you change? I found myself explaining the balance of flavors. Julian watched me with something like pride. Patricia listened intently. You know, we're planning a major corporate event in August, Patricia said as coffee was served. A celebration for the successful completion of our sustainability project. Assuming Julian's team delivers everything they've promised, of course. She smiled at him. We haven't settled on a caterer yet. Would your bakery be interested in handling the desserts? I blinked, caught off guard. We're a small operation. I'm not sure we'd have the capacity for a large corporate event. Let me rephrase. Would you personally be interested in creating desserts for the event? We could work around your schedule, and I'm authorized to offer very competitive compensation. Julian squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. Elizabeth's work is exceptional. You'd be lucky to have her. I'd need to talk to my boss, make sure it wouldn't conflict with bakery commitments. But yes, I'd be interested in discussing it further. Patricia smiled warmly. Excellent. I'll have my assistant reach out to you next week with details. And Julian, excellent choice in girlfriend. She's delightful. After dinner, Julian drove me home. I was quiet, processing. At my apartment building, he parked. That was quite an evening, he said. Did you plan that? The dessert conversation? Patricia offering me that job. I didn't plan anything. I told Patricia we were having dinner, and I mentioned you were a pastry chef. The rest was all her genuine interest, and your talent speaking for itself. But you knew she might offer me something. I hoped she might see what I see, that you're incredibly skilled at what you do and deserve opportunities to showcase that talent. Is that so wrong? I studied his face in the dim light. I can't tell if you're genuinely trying to help me or if this is all part of some elaborate revenge plot. Can it be both? I care about you, Elizabeth. That's real. But I also think the people who've hurt you deserve a dose of reality, through them having to acknowledge your talent and value, because it affects things they care about. His is complicated. The best things usually are. He reached over, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. For what it's worth, I'm falling for you. That complicates things, too. But I'm not sorry about it. My breath caught. Julian, you don't have to say. I just wanted you to know where I stand. Now go inside before I do something impulsive, like kiss you senseless in front of your building. I got out of the car, but leaned back through the window. I'm falling for you, too, just so you know. His smile could have lit up the entire city. Good. That makes what comes next easier. What comes next? Patience. You'll see. The following week, Patricia's assistant called with details about the corporate event. It would be in mid-August, celebrating the completion of Bennett Health Solutions' transition to sustainable practices. They wanted an elaborate dessert spread for 200 guests, and they were offering 3 times my usual rate. My boss was thrilled. We worked out an arrangement where I'd use the bakery kitchen during off hours. The bakery would get credited, and I'd receive the bulk of the payment. Julian and I fell into a pattern over the next few weeks. Dinners, movies, long conversations that stretched late into the night. He was easy to be with, making me laugh, challenging me to think differently. The physical attraction was undeniable, but what surprised me was how much I enjoyed simply being around him. Our relationship deepened, moving from the exciting uncertainty of new romance into something more solid. I was in love with him, though I hadn't said the words aloud. I suspected he felt the same. We didn't talk much about Victoria or my family during those weeks. It was like we created a bubble where that drama didn't exist, where I could just be myself. Then, 6 weeks after the wedding, Victoria called. Elizabeth. Hi. Sorry I haven't been in touch since the honeymoon. Things have been crazy with settling into married life. No worries. How was the trip? Incredible. The Maldives were everything we hoped for. Listen, I wanted to see if you were free for lunch this Saturday. I feel like we haven't really talked in forever, and I want to catch up properly. I almost said no out of habit, but then I thought about Julian's words, about visibility, about respect. Sure, I can do lunch. Where did you have in mind? We met at an upscale bistro near her new house, the kind of place Victoria felt comfortable. She looked tanned and relaxed, the picture of newlywed bliss. We ordered salads and made small talk about the honeymoon, her new neighborhood, Gregory's work. So, she said finally, leaning forward, tell me about Julian. You two seemed quite close at the wedding, but you never mentioned you were seeing anyone. It's relatively new. We met a few months ago. He seems very successful. Gregory's colleagues were all impressed by him. Apparently, his company is handling a massive project for Bennett Health. There it was, the real reason for this lunch. Not sisterly bonding, but fishing for information about someone who mattered to her husband's career. Julian's very good at what he does, I said neutrally. I'm just surprised you never mentioned him before. I mean, I told you all about Gregory when we started dating. Had she, though? I remembered stilted phone calls where she'd mentioned having a boyfriend, but provided few details. But pointing that out would only create conflict, and I was curious to see where this conversation was heading. I tend to keep my personal life private. Well, I'm glad you're happy. And I heard you're doing the desserts for the Bennett Health event in August? That's wonderful. Gregory mentioned Patricia was very impressed with you. It's a good opportunity. Victoria stirred her salad absently. Listen, I wanted to apologize if things felt weird at the wedding. I know the seating arrangement wasn't ideal, and I feel bad that we didn't get much time to talk. The seating arrangement. She had the grace to look uncomfortable. That was the wedding planner's mistake. She didn't understand family dynamics, and by the time I saw the setup, it was too late to change things without causing chaos. You could have mentioned having a sister, to Gregory's colleagues, to anyone, but you didn't. That's not fair. Of course, people know I have a sister. Patricia didn't. She was surprised at the wedding when Julian mentioned it. She said you'd never brought it up during all your planning meetings. Victoria's face flushed. I don't talk about my personal life at work. Doesn't that mean you're hiding me, though? When was the last time you invited me to anything? When did you last call just to talk? Not because you needed something or had an obligation. Elizabeth, you're being dramatic. We are sisters. Of course, we have a relationship. Do we? Because from where I'm sitting, we have a biological connection and not much else. You treat me like an afterthought, like someone you have to include out of duty, but would rather forget. Victoria set down her fork, her composure cracking slightly. Is that really what you think? That I don't care about you? I think you care about me the way you care about distant cousins, present at major events, but not really part of your life. And honestly, I've accepted that. What bothers me is the pretense. Don't invite me to lunch and act like we're close when we both know we're not. Fine. You want honesty. I'll give you honesty. You made choices that embarrassed our mother. You chose a career path she couldn't brag about to her friends. You refused to conform to the expectations we grew up with. And yes, that created distance between us. I'm sorry if that hurts your feelings, but it's the truth. Her words confirmed what I'd always suspected but never heard spoken aloud. I wasn't the disappointment because I'd failed. I was the disappointment because I'd refused to compete on their terms. Thank you for finally being honest, I said quietly. But here's some honesty back. I'm not embarrassed by my choices. I love what I do and I'm good at it. If that's not enough for you or Mother, that's your problem, not mine. And I'm done apologizing for being myself. I stood, placing enough cash on the table to cover my meal. Thanks for lunch, Victoria. And congratulations again on your marriage. I hope it brings you everything you're looking for. I left before she could respond, my hand shaking as I walked to my car. The conversation had been brutal but necessary. Something inside me had shifted, some fundamental refusal to keep accepting crumbs of affection from people who saw me as lesser. Julian called that evening. I told him about the lunch, about Victoria's admission, about how I'd finally stood up for myself. I'm proud of you, he said. That took courage. It felt good. Terrifying, but good. Like I finally said things that needed saying. Are you ready for the next step? Not just as the pastry chef. I want you visible and acknowledged and impossible to dismiss. Are you ready for that? I thought about Victoria's face during our lunch, my mother's dismissive comments, all the years of being treated as less than. Yes, I said. I'm ready. The next 3 weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. I worked obsessively on the dessert menu, creating elegant individual portions that would be both beautiful and delicious. Chocolate raspberry tarts with gold leaf, lemon panna cotta with edible flowers, miniature opera cakes with perfect layers, honey lavender macarons that melted on the tongue. Each piece was a work of art, proof of my skill and dedication. Julian helped where he could, taste testing components, offering honest feedback. Our relationship had deepened, moving from the exciting uncertainty of new romance into something more solid. The night of the event arrived. It was held at an elegant space downtown, all glass walls and modern architecture. I had spent the afternoon setting up the dessert display, arranging each piece on tiered stands with strategic lighting. I changed into a stunning emerald dress Julian had insisted on buying me, telling me I needed to look as impressive as my desserts. When Julian saw me, his expression made the effort worthwhile. You're breathtaking, he said simply. You clean up pretty well yourself. The event was in full swing when we made our entrance. 200 guests mingled. Pharmaceutical executives, city officials, business leaders. I spotted Gregory and Victoria across the room, deep in conversation. My mother was there, too, looking elegant in champagne silk. Patricia spotted us immediately and rushed over. Elizabeth, the desserts are stunning. Everyone is already talking about them. You've outdone yourself. Thank you. I'm glad they've been well received. Meet them? You've exceeded them by miles. Come, I want to introduce you to some people. The next hour was surreal. Patricia pulled me from group to group, introducing me as the talented pastry chef responsible for the incredible desserts. People complimented my work, asked about my training, requested business cards. I was visible in a way I'd never been at family events, acknowledged for my actual skills rather than dismissed for my choices. Julian stayed close, his presence both supportive and strategic. He made sure to mention our relationship to everyone we spoke with, positioning me not just as the chef, but as his partner. In this world that valued connections and status, being Julian's girlfriend carried weight. I watched Victoria notice us from across the room, saw her expression shift from confusion to recognition, to something that looked like discomfort. She said something to Gregory, and they both looked our way. "They've spotted us," Julian murmured in my ear. "Ready for what?" "To remind them you exist." Before I could respond, Gregory approached with Victoria beside him. Up close, he looked strained. "Julian, Elizabeth, good to see you both." "Elizabeth, I've heard nothing but praise for your desserts. Very impressive work." "Thank you. I'm pleased they've been well received." Victoria stood slightly behind Gregory, her expression carefully neutral. "Hi, Elizabeth. Everything looks beautiful." "Thank you, Victoria." An awkward silence stretched. Finally, Gregory broke it. "Julian, I was hoping we could discuss the final phase of the sustainability project. There are some budget considerations we need to address." "Of course. Elizabeth, would you excuse me for a few minutes?" I nodded, and the two men moved away, leaving me alone with Victoria. The moment felt heavy with unspoken words. "You've been busy," Victoria said finally. "Landing major catering jobs, dating important consultants. Quite a change from the last time we talked." "I've always been busy. You just never noticed." "That's not fair, is it? You spent years dismissing what I do as insignificant. Now that it's—" Victoria's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "What do you want from me, Elizabeth? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate your career choices. I'm sorry the wedding seating was bad. I'm sorry we're not closer. Is that what you need to hear?" "I don't need anything from you anymore. That's what you don't understand. I'm not the little sister begging for scraps of approval. I've built a life I'm proud of, with people who value me for who I actually am." "People like Julian, you mean?" "Gregory says he's very influential in his field. Very useful to know." The implication stung, even though I'd expected it. "You think I'm using him? Or that he's using me? That's the only way you can understand this, isn't it? As a transaction." "I'm just saying it's convenient. You show up at my wedding alone and invisible, and now suddenly you're dating someone Gregory's company depends on and getting hired for major events. It's quite a transformation." Before I could respond, Julian returned with Gregory. Both men looked tense. "Victoria, we should mingle with the other guests," Gregory said, his tone brooking no argument. "There are several board members here we need to speak with." Victoria shot me one last unreadable look before allowing Gregory to guide her away. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "That looked intense," Julian observed. "Are you okay?" "She thinks I'm using you to gain status, or that you're using me to influence Gregory's business decisions. She can't conceive of us just genuinely caring about each other." "Does her opinion matter to you?" I thought about it honestly. Not as much as it would have a few months ago. I'm done needing her approval. "Good, because you're about to get something better than approval." "What do you mean?" Julian smiled, that calculating expression I'd seen before returning. "Watch." Patricia approached the microphone setup. The room quieted as she spoke about the successful sustainability project, thanking Julian's team. Then she pivoted. "I also want to recognize someone who made tonight extra special. Elizabeth, could you join me up here?" My heart hammered as I made my way to the front. Patricia smiled warmly. "Elizabeth created every single dessert you've enjoyed tonight. Her artistry and skill transformed our celebration into something truly memorable. But more than that, she represents exactly the kind of innovation and dedication we're trying to foster at Bennett Health Solutions, which is why I'm pleased to announce that we'll be partnering with her for all of our major events going forward. Elizabeth, thank you for your incredible work." The room erupted in applause. I stood there, stunned, as Patricia handed me an envelope containing the contract. My eyes found Julian in the crowd, saw his proud smile, and understood that he'd orchestrated this moment perfectly. Then I found Victoria. She stood next to Gregory, clapping along with everyone else, but her expression was complex. Surprise, certainly discomfort, maybe even a hint of respect she'd never shown before. Our mother stood beside them, looking equally shocked. For the first time in my life, I was the center of attention in a room that included my family. And it was because of my own merit, my own skills, my own worth. Not because I'd married well or achieved conventional success, but because I'd excelled at something I loved. How does it feel? Julian whispered when I returned to his side, pulling me close and kissing my temple, like vindication, like finally being seen. You were always worth seeing. They were just too blind to notice. In the months that followed, everything changed. The Bennett Health Partnership led to other opportunities, other high-profile events that showcased my work. Julian and I moved in together, our relationship deepening into something permanent and real. We talked about the future, marriage, children, building a life that honored both our ambitions. Victoria and I reached a cautious détente. We weren't close, probably never would be, but there was mutual respect now. She'd learned that dismissing me came with consequences, that I had value beyond her narrow definition of success. Our interactions remained formal but cordial. Family gatherings were no longer the painful exercises in invisibility they'd once been. My mother struggled more with the adjustment. She'd built her identity around Victoria's achievements, and having to acknowledge mine upset her carefully maintained hierarchy. But even she couldn't ignore the reality of my success. As for Victoria and Gregory, the consequences of her husband's company for sustainability consulting meant that Victoria could never fully dismiss me without potentially damaging his professional relationships. She'd backed herself into a corner of forced civility, having to include me in family events and acknowledge my presence because doing otherwise might reflect poorly on Gregory. The pharmaceutical industry was smaller than people realized, and word traveled fast about how executives' families conducted themselves. Victoria, who had always been so careful about maintaining the perfect image, now had to ensure that image included being a supportive sister. The irony wasn't lost on me. She'd spent years making me invisible, and now she was trapped in a situation where she had to make me visible, had to sing my praises to her husband's colleagues, had to pretend we'd always been close. Her perfect life now required my presence, and that requirement would follow her for as long as Gregory's career depended on maintaining good relationships with Julian's firm. She'd constructed her own cage, one where she'd forever be reminded that the sister she dismissed had become someone she couldn't afford to ignore. Looking back on that wedding day, sitting behind that pillar, feeling invisible and worthless, I could hardly recognize the person I'd been. Julian had offered me more than fake dating protection at a difficult event. He'd offered me a mirror that reflected my true worth, a partnership that elevated rather than diminished, and the tools to demand the respect I'd always deserved. The revenge, if that's what it was, hadn't been about cruelty or destruction. It had been about finally, definitively proving that I mattered. Not because of who I married or how I compared to my sister, but because of who I was and what I could do. And as I stand here in the kitchen of the bakery I now co-own, creating art from flour and sugar and skill, I realized that the best revenge had been becoming exactly who I was meant to be and making them all watch while I did it. So, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to fight for your worth against your own family? I really want to hear your thoughts down in the comments.